The Moon Landing, 1969. If you enjoy calm storytelling, please subscribe and like the video to help this channel grow. Fate and on Earth, a blue and white marble turning slowly against the black. The camera glides closer to the United States in the late 1960s, a nation crowded with noise and change, civil rights marches, campus debates, music on every street, and the constant drumbeat of the Cold War. Above the politics and the protests, another rhythm has been building for a decade, the countdowns that lift rockets skyward. The space race began as a strategic contest with the Soviet Union, but by 1969 it has grown into something larger, a public test of what science, teamwork, and will can accomplish. The story reaches back to 1961. President John F. Kennedy steps to a lectern and, with a voice both steady and urgent, sets a national goal: land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade is out. It is a sentence with a timeline, a promise, and an invitation. Engineers, technicians, and test pilots answer. The Mercury program proves that a person can orbit and return. Gemini teaches spacewalking, rendezvous, docking, and long-duration flight. Quietly, in windowless rooms, mathematicians calculate trajectories by hand and check them with early computers. Factories hum, new materials are invented, old ideas are retired. Behind every headline, thousands of people take small steps that add up to the chance for one giant leap. At the center of the plan stands a rocket taller than a 36-story building, the Saturn V. Its 5 first-stage F-1 engines can swallow propellant by the ton and turn it into thrust like a controlled thunderstorm. The entire vehicle is a stack of stages, SIC for liftoff, S2 to push through the thinning air, SIVB to light again in orbit and fling the spacecraft toward the moon. Above the rocket sits the spacecraft itself, the command module, a conical home named Columbia for the crew, a cylindrical service module carrying oxygen, water, fuel cells, and the main engine, and, tucked inside the stack like a folded insect, the lunar module Eagle, designed for the vacuum and 1/6 gravity of the moon. There is practice before the big attempt. In December 1968, Apollo 8 carries astronauts around the moon for the first time. They read from Genesis on Christmas Eve as Earth rises over a gray horizon, and the television signal carries that view into living rooms. In March 1969, Apollo 9 tests the lunar module in Earth orbit. In May, Apollo 10 flies to lunar orbit and takes the lander to within about 15 kilometers of the surface before returning, a dress rehearsal that proves the choreography works. The stage is set for Apollo 11. Now the date, July 16, 1969. At Kennedy Space Center, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin Buzz Aldrin ride an elevator to the top of the Saturn V. The vehicle steams and crackles in the Florida heat, a million people line beaches and causeways to watch. At 9:32 a.m. Eastern Time, the count reaches 0. The engines ignite in a bloom of white flame. The rocket lifts slowly, as if reluctant, then gathers speed. Homes shake as far as miles away. Across the nation and around the world, televisions glow, radios crackle, people hold their breath. In minutes the first stage is spent and separates, the second stage lights, the stack climbs on. In orbit, Earth curves beneath the windows. After a systems check, the third stage fires again, translunar injection, and the astronauts feel the push that will send them out of Earth orbit. Armstrong and Aldrin turn the command service module around, dock with the lunar module, and pull it free of the spent booster. A long coast begins, 3 days of mid-course corrections and checklists, of conversations with mission control and jokes shared in the small cabin, of porthole views where Earth shrinks to a coin and the moon grows to a world. The moon grows from a coin to a world. On July 19, Apollo 11 slips behind it and, out of radio contact, fires the service module's engine to break into orbit, lunar orbit insertion. When the spacecraft re-emerges, controllers in Houston cheer, the numbers are on target. The crew inspects landing sites through small triangular windows. The surface is a palette of grays, with craters like thumbprints pressed into clay. On July 20th, Armstrong and Aldrin climb into Eagle and power it up. Columbia remains in orbit with Collins alone, a caretaker for the ride home. The separation is gentle. From Collins's window, the lander looks like a fragile insect drifting away. As Eagle fires its descent engine, the computer keeps time with a heartbeat of data. Then, unexpected alarms, 1201 and 1202, flash on the guidance computer. In mission control, controllers recognize them as executive overflows, a result of the computer handling more tasks than expected but still able to continue. The landing proceeds. At about 500 meters up, Armstrong sees that the computer's target point is strewn with boulders. He takes semi-manual control, skimming forward in a dusty glide. Fuel runs low. Controllers call out the seconds remaining. Aldrin feeds range and velocity by voice. Dust blankets the view as the engine stirs the surface, the radar locks in, the descent rate eases. Contact light, Aldrin says as a probe touches the surface. Armstrong shuts down the engine. A moment of stillness. Then his voice, Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Cheers, claps, and a few tears flow in the control room and in millions of homes. Hours later, the EVA, the extravehicular activity, begins. The hatch opens. Armstrong squeezes through in his pressurized suit and climbs down the ladder, pausing on the small round footpad. A camera mounted on the descent stage sends a ghostly picture to Earth, a ladder, a boot, a shadow. He tests the last step, speaks the words that become a hinge in the story of our species. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Aldrin follows, describing the scene as magnificent desolation. The adjectives don't fight, they fit. The surface is bright in sunlight, black in shade, the horizon close because the moon is small. Above it all, the sky is a perfect, starless night. They work by checklist and memory. First tasks, take contingency soil samples in case the EVA must be cut short. Unfurl the U.S. flag, which wavers briefly in the vacuum as the pole twists. Read a plaque on a lander leg, here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind. Call the president by radio, his voice is formal but warm, traveling across 250,000 miles. Deploy experiments, a seismometer to listen for moonquakes, a laser retroreflector, a set of corner cube mirrors, so that scientists can bounce light off the surface for decades to come. Take photographs with a Hasselblad camera, practiced motions in gloves built for another world. The EVA lasts about 2.5 hours. The samples, rocks, dust, core tubes, fill collection bags and weigh less in the moon's gravity but will be heavy with knowledge when returned. Aldrin hops with a 2-footed gait, Armstrong tries a loping stride, both find moving easier than expected. The suits are stiff but workable. Every motion is economical, a dance of caution and curiosity. Before re-entering Eagle, They leave behind a small pouch with a gold olive branch and memorial patches for fallen astronauts and cosmonauts, reminders that exploration often carries a price. While they work, Collins circles above in Columbia, checking systems and taking photographs of the surface that only he sees with the naked eye. He is alone but not lonely. His careful notes sound like the voice of the whole program, methodical, precise, quietly proud. At times the spacecraft passes behind the moon and radio silence reigns. He jokes later that for those minutes he was not just out of radio contact, but out of touch with all humanity, and he savors the solitude. When the time comes to depart, Armstrong and Aldrin tidy the cabin, stow film canisters and sample bags, and sleep in hammocks slung like narrow slings across the cramped interior. The next day, they jettison the lander's descent stage, fire the ascent engine, and rise on a bright spear of flame to meet Collins. Docking is delicate but swift. The moon recedes. The three men are together again, their voices lighter. The plan home is a reversal of the steps that brought them here. The service module's engine fires to escape lunar orbit. The men watch the moon shrink and then, slowly, Earth swell, a globe painted with storm systems and continents. They release the lunar module. Later it will crash on the moon, its seismometer sending a last tremor through the lunar crust. The crew spends hours in routine tasks that feel anything but routine, aligning the guidance platform, checking oxygen pressure, trimming the shape of their path home. On July 24, 1969, Columbia plunges into Earth's atmosphere like a meteor. Plasma wraps the capsule in a sheath of fire. The radio goes quiet, then reopens. Parachutes bloom, orange and white. The USS Hornet is waiting in the Pacific. Swimmers in frogman suits secure the capsule. The astronauts climb into a floating raft and then into a mobile quarantine facility, a trailer with small windows and big purpose. Scientists are cautious. No one expects lunar germs, but procedure is procedure. The crew grins at cameras through glass. Across Earth, celebrations echo. In cities and villages, people shout and dance. Headlines greet the mission in dozens of languages. The story seems to belong to everyone. In some places, church bells ring. In others, children draw pictures of a tiny ladder in an enormous sky. For a moment, people who disagree on nearly everything can agree on this: it is possible to do something astonishing by gathering skill, patience, and courage, and pointing them in the same direction. Behind the famous moments stand thousands of unsung ones. The Apollo guidance computer, with memory measured in kilobytes, uses clever software designed to prioritize tasks. What saved the landing during those 1,201 and 1,202 alarms? Katherine Johnson, Margaret Hamilton, and many other mathematicians and programmers shape equations into flight plans and code into safety nets. Technicians stitch spacesuits with the delicate accuracy of master tailors. Welders form fuel tanks with seams that must not fail. Divers practice recovery procedures in swimming pools. Crane operators rehearse lift after lift. The mission is a cathedral of details. The mission's science is compact but powerful. The rock samples reveal a moon scarred by ancient impacts and volcanic flows, its crust rich in anorthosite, pale, reflective rock that builds the highlands. The cratered surfaces tell of a heavy bombardment billions of years ago that also battered Earth when life was young. The seismometer hears quakes triggered by tidal flexing and the occasional impact. The laser reflector keeps listening to this day. Each measurement tightens our understanding of how Earth and Moon move together, a delicate gravitational dance. The mission's politics and culture are as significant as its science. The space race began as a rivalry, and Apollo 11 undeniably answers the Soviet Union's early leads, Sputnik in 1957, Gagarin's orbit in 1961, and a string of firsts. Yet by the time of the landing, the tone is changing. Soviet engineers and scientists, adversaries on paper, often respect each other's work across the divide. In decades to come, cooperation will become the rule. Apollo-Soyuz in 1975, the Shuttle Mir program, and the International Space Station that turns overhead like a patient second star. The moon landing helps shift imagination from competition to collaboration. The moonwalk does not end the journey. Apollo 12 follows in November 1969 with a pinpoint landing near the Surveyor 3 probe. Apollo 13 survives an onboard explosion in April 1970 and returns safely through ingenuity and grit, a reminder that spaceflight never becomes easy. Apollo 14, 15, 16, and 17 conduct increasingly ambitious explorations with rovers and longer EVAs, sampling mountains and valleys under a sky forever starless. Then, budgets tighten and priorities shift. The last footprints are left in 1972, and the moon returns to a quiet orbit, waiting for new visitors. Why does this moment endure? Part of the answer is what it asked of us. Apollo required 1 million discrete acts of competence, solder joints that held, bolts torqued exactly so, equations checked twice, calls made in seconds with consequences measured in lives. It required the humility to test, fail, and learn, the imagination to design for problems we had never seen, and the discipline to knit those answers into a sequence that could not be paused once started. It made heroes of quiet people who preferred the workshop to the spotlight. Another part lies in what it revealed. The view of Earth from lunar distance, small, colorful, and alone, rearranged imaginations and inspired movements for environmental protection and global cooperation. The phrase "we came in peace" read in dozens of languages suggested a politics that could be wider than borders. Children who pressed faces to TV screens grew up to become scientists, teachers, doctors, engineers, artists, trades of exploration in their own right. The moon landing taught that the frontier is not purely a place, it is a habit of mind. Yet the story is also human at its core. Armstrong, careful and understated, pilots a spacecraft the way a good surgeon uses a scalpel, with respect for consequence. Aldrin, systematic and forthright, narrates actions so the record will be clear. Collins, eloquent and precise, keeps the path home secure. Their teamwork is a model of roles understood and egos kept in service of the mission. In their post-flight interviews, they thank the thousands whose names never make headlines. Their humor is dry, their gratitude genuine. The closing sequence returns to the Sea of Tranquility. The descent stage sits like a small altar under a high black sky. Footprints loop away from the ladder and back again. A small rectangle of fabric stands on its thin pole, forever still. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Earth is rising, though no eye is there to see it. The silence is not emptiness, it is the quiet of a place waiting for visitors. Cut to the blue planet. In classrooms, students trace orbits on chalkboards. In laboratories, engineers sketch new capsules on translucent paper over light tables, then on screens. In observatories, scientists bounce lasers off the reflector left by Eagle. In museums, a child presses a hand to the glass that holds a rock older than any mountain back home. In conversations around kitchen tables, people recall where they were when the first boot touched the powder and a sentence entered the common language. The moon landing of 1969 is a proof that with a clear goal, patient work, and careful courage, human beings can turn a distant hope into a place you can stand. The mission took 8 days, its echo has lasted for generations. The next chapters will belong to new crews, new nations, and new ideas, robot scouts, orbiting gateways, and perhaps one day, families who look up at night and say not they were there, but we are there. The line between science fiction and history is a ladder and a footprint. Fade out on a last image, 3 signatures on a flight plan, 3 parachutes opening against a bright sky, 3 men smiling behind a quarantine window, millions of faces turned upward together. The story does not end, it continues every time someone asks a hard question and is willing to build the tools to answer it. The moon waits, patient as stone, generous as a mirror. We look, we learn, and we go. Between the famous scenes, craft details matter. The lunar module, built by Grumman, used thin aluminum walls and gold foil blankets, strong by shape more than mass. It had 2 engines, a throttleable descent engine and a simple ascent engine designed to light once, without fail. The command module's heat shield later met plasma at thousands of degrees. The service module carried the big engine that steered the journey. The spacesuits were layered machines with a backpack, the portable life support system, that supplied oxygen, scrubbed carbon dioxide, and circulated cooling water. Gold visors tamed sunlight, clingy dust coated every seam. Radio loops carried voices to Houston with the crisp Quindar beep that still signals Apollo in the public imagination. Mission control worked like an orchestra. Flight director Gene Kranz sat center, controllers owned their slices, Guido for guidance, Ecom for life support, Telmu for the lander's telemetry, Capcom as the single voice to the crew. When the 1201-1202 alarms flashed, training paid off, the team recognized a manageable computer overload and pressed on. A world-spanning network handed the signal from dish to dish, Goldstone, Madrid, and Australia, so the live television from the moon, grainy but intimate, reached hundreds of millions, 1 boot, 1 ladder, 1 small step. Numbers fix the moment. Eagle touched down at 2017 and 40 seconds UTC on July 20, 1969. Armstrong stepped onto the surface at 2:56 UTC on July 21. The surface stay was about 21 hours 36 minutes, the EVA, 2 hours 31 minutes. The crew collected roughly 21.5 kilograms of samples and deployed a seismometer and a laser reflector that scientists still ping with light to measure the Earth-Moon distance to millimeters. After splashdown, the astronauts spent 21 days in quarantine, first aboard USS Hornet, then at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, while doctors and scientists examined crew and rocks that smelled faintly of spent fireworks. Debate traveled with the Triumph. At its peak, Apollo consumed about 4% of the federal budget. Some called it too costly, others pointed to jobs, new techniques, and the unifying force of an ambitious, peaceful goal. The argument did not dim the wonder, it proved that a democracy can dispute and still do the difficult. Training reached far from Florida. Armstrong and Aldrin practiced geology in desert craters with teachers like Gene Shoemaker and Lee Silver, rehearsed photography, and flew countless simulated landings so the real descent would feel familiar even when fuel ran thin. Culture answered quickly. Children drew moon ladders, musicians wrote about tranquility, people stepped outside at night and felt both closer to the moon and farther from it. The object in the sky had not changed, our relationship to it had.